Hello and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where usually we'd be doing a look back at 2025 overall because it would be such a slow week. But we're going to do that next Movie Math because what do you know, even with no big new movies hitting theaters this weekend, although we are going to discuss Stranger Things 5's theatrical experiment, and I'll tell you why I'm calling it an experiment later in this video. But we've got a lot to talk about what's happening right now this weekend because of the holds. The holds! Wowza! Not a single movie in the entire top 10 dropped more than 40% over the weekend, as Hollywood successfully served leftovers for the post-New Year's frame. Everybody loved what Hollywood was serving. They're like, these still taste great. And as Avatar Fire and Ash joined the $1 billion club, Avatar fans throughout the land rejoiced and exclaimed, "Sucketh that, haters," because they were heavily emotionally involved in the franchise, which is a large part what got it to $1 billion. Now, it took Fire and Ash 18 days to get to $1 billion, which is 4 days slower than The Way of Water, but just 1 day slower than the first Avatar back in 2009. The fact that the first Avatar was able to make $1 billion so quickly back then is truly phenomenal. But the trades are agreeing with my prediction, my intellectual prediction, that Avatar 3 will finish at around $1.5 billion. And again, the way I got that number was that I observed it was a similar situation to Wicked for Good, whereas the hardcore fandom is still loving it, but the rest of us are a little less impressed. So I felt that it would drop similarly. And it seems that's why, there are patterns. You got to see the patterns in the box office. And that's how Hollywood is able to make the predictions that they do that are usually correct. So we're playing the game. We're playing the game. I love it. But yet many of Avatar's most faithful fans feel it in their bones that this third Avatar will also join the $2 billion club. But hey, my gut feeling was that it wouldn't even make $1 billion. So we've got to use our heads. And that's the part of me that said 1.5. Yes, while Avatar is much stronger overseas than Wicked, which is the evidence that many of you have been using to say, hey, $2 billion, here we come, it's the domestic box office where we're having some problems. So, in its first 17 days domestic, Avatar Fire and Ash has reached $306 million. Wait a minute, didn't it take 18 days for it to reach $1 billion? Well, that's because it opened overseas on December 17th, 2 days before it opened in the United States, and it hit $1 billion yesterday, thus the 18 days. We're at 19 days worldwide. All right, so anyway, domestically, again, 17 days out, we've got 306 for Fire and Ash, but Way of Water at this point was already at 425. Woo! Over 100 million more. And the first Avatar, though, to be fair, was only a scooch ahead at 352. But that was back in 2009. To give you an idea of where we were back then, back in the day, Netflix had only just pivoted from physical media to digital streaming in 2007, but at that point hadn't even launched their mobile app, which wouldn't happen until the next year in 2010. So the reason I bring all that up is to say that Avatar would go on to enjoy a much longer theatrical window with people not even thinking of when they'd be able to watch it at home because the digital space wasn't what it has become. Hollywood drank their own milkshake in some ways. Although Netflix, of course, forced them to. They're like, we better drink it because Netflix is already drinking it. And Netflix, of course, is about to create more problems with the acquisition of Warner Brothers. We're going to talk about that with Stranger Things. Anyway, what do you think? With your head, not your gut, where do you think Avatar 3 will end its worldwide box office run? If it fails to break the $2 billion mark, China's Neza 2 will hold on to the number one spot for the year. But it will be followed by 3 Disney movies. Disney's only hits of the year, mind you. But hey, 3 of a kind when it's $1 billion movies is a winning hand. And once again, Disney is the only Hollywood studio to put out $1 billion picture this year, let alone 3 of them. And that was the case last year, where they also were the only $1 billion studio with, again, 3 films. 3 similar films, Bob Iger definitely got the Disney machine back up and running, but he's supposed to choose a successor at the beginning of this year, 2026. And when I asked a friend of mine in the industry who they thought Iger would pick this time, well, I hope he learned from the last time. I think the difference here is that I don't know what Bob Iger's plans are. The problem the first time was that he wanted to stay on and do the fun stuff and give the crappy stuff to somebody else, only for the other person to say, I want to do the fun stuff too. And that's where we hit a rock. There were other issues as well, but it was bad. It was real bad. And because of that, my friend guessed that Disney would simply throw even more money at Iger and get him to extend his contract yet again for fear of a Chapek 2.0. Sure, it would be expensive to keep Iger on, but it would be more expensive to the company to have another problems like they did with Chapek, which in some ways they're still trying to recover from. What do you think will happen with Disney's line of succession? Maybe it'll someday be a series. And the Disney drama is pretty interesting. There's a dude who makes his whole living off of it, and he's pretty good at it. I think he wrote one book, and he did a New York Times article, and he did a real nice job. But anyway, what do you think will happen, and what do you want to see happen? I'm personally rooting for Dana Walden, as she's a huge Bob Iger disciple, and in fact was a large part of getting him to come back to fix both Chapek and Iger's own mess, because Iger had chosen Chapek. But I would like to see successful female executives once again in the Hollywood space. So come on, Dana, get in there. So yeah, Jimmy C, the only director to ever have $4 billion pictures. And James Gunn, by the way, as he says, he doesn't care about prestige. He's very happy in the mainstream genre space. Well, Jimmy C waves his Oscars around. You can't get more mainstream and genre-y than Mr. James Cameron. And by the way, I really liked Superman, and it made my top 10 list for the year. Both of my top 10 lists, movies and shows for 2025, are now available. And if you subscribe and hit the notifications bell, well, you'll know as soon as these videos go up. But you can check them out right now as well. Even Christopher Nolan only has $2 billion pictures, as Oppenheimer fell just a touch short. By the way, Gunn, Nolan got those $2 billion pictures with Batman movies, right? And a ton of awards. One got an Oscar, and, Nolan is considered a prestige director. Because, the reason I bring this up is that DC's specialty, ushered in by Nolan, was awards-worthy fare. I mean, people thought The Dark Knight was so extraordinary that when it wasn't nominated for Best Picture, they actually changed the rules for the Academy Awards. And that had been what has separated it from Marvel. And Matt Reeves has carried on that tradition. But Gunn has moved DC away from prestige fare, but without the box office to make it worth it, to show for it, right? It's not like he's making so much money. You're like, well, I guess in the end of the day, the trade-off was worth it. Instead, we're just like, so now we have less money and no awards, huh? All right, just something to think about. I'm just saying. All right, who even asked him that? Okay. I think Cameron will at least make Avatar 4. Part of me says if I were Disney, maybe I'd only greenlight one more. But it might be more cost effective for him to make them at the same time like they did with Wicked. And I believe the way he did with Avatar 2 and 3, right? I mean, whatever. Tell your story, Jimmy, and we'll count our money. Although you can be sure that Jimmy's getting paid as well. Who's not getting paid off of the theatrical revenue? The cast of Stranger Things. So word is that Stranger Things 5's final episode, the series finale, was such a hot ticket at theaters that with just showings on New Year's Eve, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then also on New Year's Day, so it wasn't even for an entire weekend, they still cleared 25 to 30 million in theaters. Yet you won't see it in the top 10, even though that number would make it a close second right behind Avatar, Fire and Ash. Why not? Contracts! So yes, there was nothing built into the contracts for the Stranger Things talent, I believe both in front of and behind the camera, for a theatrical release. I think maybe it would be easier to work out stuff with the Duffer Brothers, but I think with the actors, it's a real issue. And it would be time-consuming and potentially expensive to renegotiate those contracts, especially for a last-minute idea to go to theaters. The Duffer Brothers said that had been something they'd been thinking about for a while, but maybe they should have told the legal team that. I believe going forward, most contracts probably will allow for more fluidity in terms of how to release things. The problem is that, people want a cut of any revenue that would come from theatrical. And what would that cut be? That's not negotiated. And if you wanted to negotiate it, the actors would come in with a much stronger stance than they would otherwise. They're like, do you want to release this in theaters or not? I'm keeping you from doing it. Give me more money or it's not going to happen. So the workaround was the Netflix allowed theaters to sell $20 vouchers for concessions instead. And therefore get an assigned seat. And also Netflix didn't ask for a cut of those concessions, which I didn't even know you could do. I thought theaters got to keep the entire amount of concessions. I can't believe that studios can take such a large percentage of ticket sales at the beginning and then also part of the concessions. Maybe because it was just concessions. Netflix would have had a right to ask for part of that, but they didn't, allowing theaters to keep the entire 25 to 30 million. Contracts, by the way, also tripped up the Snyder Cut in the opposite direction. Movie contracts, which didn't allow for a series release. So the Snyder Cut couldn't become a 4-night event. Although at the end of the day, I don't know if there was enough different material, particularly up front, which would have been the debut, the first impression for the new cut, to warrant a 4-night event. But I would have been in favor of that. I think it would have been interesting. It would have certainly been something to discuss turning a movie into a series. And I think it would have allowed for more discussion, as weekly releases do. What release strategy do you think would have been better for the Snyder Cut, right? As a 4-hour movie as it was released, or 4 1-hour episodes? Was it worth it to release Stranger Things 5's finale in theaters? I think hands down for the fans, it was worth it. It was a wonderful experience. I've heard so many of you say, and when I watched the finale, as I said in my breakdown, I did regret not seeing it in theaters with fellow fans of the show. But from a business perspective, that's what I'm curious about. And I think the answer is yes and no. For the franchise itself, not so much. I mean, there's this nice headline, but it's not in the top 10, which would have been great to see, like we did with K-pop Demon Hunters. How did that get released in theaters officially so that it could be included in the top 10? Well, that was a negative pickup for the entire film. What that means is that you buy a movie in whole. It's already completed, and instead of the other distributor, in this case, or Sony distributing it themselves, they sell the whole entire thing as just a giant chunk with one final deal to another distributor. There are no contracts with talent. Those remain with Sony. So yes, Sony sold the entire film, to Netflix so that Netflix could therefore do whatever they wanted with it. And sure, it was a wonderful thing, as I said, to do for fans to release Stranger Things' finale in theaters. But Volume 2 really ground the momentum for the final season to a halt. It really, really did. The downside of releasing shows in parts. And the finale, even with a theatrical release, which for many was still a party, it just couldn't turn the negative narrative around. The Duffer Brothers certainly haven't been helping with doing interviews where they say they guess this is what happened when asked to explain things that were left hanging at the end of the show. But they're the creators. They should know what happened. And now they're saying that those answers aren't great because they had the flu when they did those, or one of them had the flu when doing those interviews. And you're like, come on, dude. I'd say the Ellisons might be a little worried about all the money they just spent to steal the Duffer Brothers away from Netflix, but they have bigger problems with their new vision for CBS blowing up in their face in slow motion. I think the craziest part of that so far is when the new anchor insisted that he would do a better job than Walter freaking Cronkite. Speaking of crazy things, Stranger Things in theaters is both helping and hurting Netflix, I think, when it comes to their potential acquisition of Warner Brothers. Here's how. So yeah, $25 to $30 million to theaters for the series finale of a streaming show is a wonderful gift of cash at the end of the year, as theaters, even though the end of the year has been great at the box office, it's still tough in the theatrical space. So it really it's like, hey, we see you exhibitors and we care about you, right? That Netflix will not only be a source of, that they not only can deliver a theatrical hit like they will continue to do with the Warner Brothers movies, right? But they also have these new out-of-the-box fresh ideas like putting an episode of a streaming show in theaters, which fans have been begging other streamers to do like HBO, and yet has not really happened. But be careful, movie theaters. This is a trick because as Netflix gives you 25 to 30 million with one hand, why don't they want any of that? Is it too good to be true? It is too good to be true because as they give you that money with this hand, they're taking away potentially so much more with the other. Because buried beneath this headline is the rumor that Netflix really likes the 17-day theatrical window, which Universal and Warner Brothers, to be fair, themselves have used, but only for their very small, unsuccessful movies. Universal otherwise does a 30-day theatrical window. And Netflix currently uses the 17-day model for their awards flicks. And so the idea is they would apply that to all Warner Brothers films. Look at Warner Brothers' 2025 slate. Being in theaters for just 17 days would significantly undermine the tremendous box office performance of many of these films. Which of these movies would you still have seen in theaters if you knew in just 17 days you'd be able to watch it on Netflix? I mean, that's the thing. Even with the flops, you don't know they're going to be 17 days until they hit the theater and they're a horrible flop. And then you look at it and you go, that's going to be 17 days, right? If you know that's Netflix's policy going forward, I think people would feel much better if they adopted the universal 30 days for hits, 17 days for, moderate to mediocre, right? I mean, they're not going to call their own movie flops. But I think that, it's really not good. Now, Netflix could say, hey man, Avatar was able to make $1 billion freaking in about that frame of time, right? But remember, Disney has the longest theatrical window. Avatar 2 didn't hit digital until late March, which is more than 3 months after it hit theaters. Can you imagine a world where Superman, Minecraft, or Sinners only play in the theatrical space exclusively or at all for 17 days? That's nuts, man. What is your response to Netflix potentially applying the 17-day theatrical window to Warner Brothers movies? As for the rest of the top 10, there it is in all its glory. Not a single drop more than 40% across the board. But wow, look at Zootopia 2 and The Housemaid. Drops under 5%, single-digit drops. And both those movies have been in theaters for a minute. The Housemaid drop is so good that I'm going to go see it this coming week. I'm like, man, I got to go. I was going to wait for it to go on digital, but hey, I love a party. And this thing really has a lot of heat. In fact, I was talking to another woman in my apartment, my parents' apartment building. It was in the laundry room. We were hanging out, helping my dad with his laundry. And so she said that she and her husband had wanted to see Marty Supreme, but got sold out. So they bought tickets to see The Housemaid instead. Yes, a busy marketplace helps all the movies. Have you gotten sold out of anything this holiday season and decided to see something else instead? And which were the movies? Interestingly, this week, Leonardo DiCaprio fretted that movie theaters might go the way of jazz clubs, with most people knowing exactly what he meant and fans of jazz going, hey. But we all knew what he meant. Although many people responded that quality of movies and theater experience, as well as the price of concessions, were the real issues, and to that I would agree. If you could be guaranteed just a good movie, a good viewing experience, not even great, and good food at a good price, I bet you go to the movies a lot more than you do right now. At this rate, though, The Housemaid could hit the century mark domestic. And just like that, Sydney Sweeney is back in it. Hey, everyone associated with this movie, as I've said before, will benefit from its success. But this is Sydney Sweeney's second time doing a great job counter-programming the holiday and then post-holiday movie season. As for Marty Supreme, it fell 29% in its second weekend in wide release. And it's doing well. But I think that A24's smallness as a studio is starting to show because it doesn't have the muscle to wrestle away even Dolby screens from Avatar. I would say that at this point, as well as Avatar is doing, let it keep IMAX, but come on, man, give me the Dolby screens. Or at least maybe on a Friday or a Saturday. Give me one or the other, right? I think that Marty not being available on any premium screens is a real issue for the film. But I think it's going to do well at the box office for a while, particularly as award season starts to pick up, because I think Marty's going to be a real contender there. So the bottom half of this list, I think, will be on digital fairly soon. Wicked for Good is already on digital, just went. But the top half of this list, I think, is going to play all the way through January in theaters, which is nice. They should all be able to do pretty darn well in that regard. Which of these movies are you still planning to see in theaters? Or maybe just decided you might go see in theaters, like I did with The Housemaid, because they're so successful. Which are you planning to wait for digital, and which are you just going to totally skip? As for digital, with the New Year's holiday, Nielsen couldn't be bothered to update their charts for the first week of December. So that means we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see if HBO hits with Welcome to Derry, right? Which, remember, Nielsen is a month behind. So for the first week of December, Welcome to Derry was getting ready to wrap up with the last 2 episodes. And then Heated Rivalry was just getting started, right? So we'll see. I know a number of you have your fingers crossed for both shows. But Netflix did update their charts for just last week, which was the week of Christmas. And my favorite version of The Grinch was number 1. Hooray! While Jim Carrey's Grinch, also excellent, was number 4, with 2 other excellent movies, Wake Up Dead Man and K-Pop Demon Hunters, sandwiched in between. New movie Goodbye June with Kate Winslet and a couple of other well-known actresses only did okay. Although Netflix, this is one of those things they just did not advertise. How competitive was that movie? With shows, this was the drop of volume 2 for Stranger Things. And it gave it a strong return to number 1 with 34.5 million views. Stronger than Wednesday's season 2, part 2 drop of 28.2 million views. And still, all the seasons of Stranger Things are still in the top 10. Emily in Paris, it's interesting. It's an interesting question. It's doing well right now, but I think, did they just kill rewatches of the show going forward? I know, and I saw a number of people say that while they like to go and revisit shows every now and then, after the final season of Stranger Things, they probably won't revisit this anymore. How about you? Emily in Paris, also in season 5, is still going strong. Well, sure enough, after its surprise drop at the end of the previous week, where it was pretty low down, now that everybody knew about it, Dave Chappelle jumped to 3rd place in his first full week on Netflix's charts. And yes, you guys were like, give Rowan Atkinson his due. And yes, he's still going strong with his newest comedy series for Netflix. And Rowan Atkinson, I've brought it up before. Blackadder is a phenomenal show, and it was one of his earliest things, and it was very verbal. But then he, of course, had Mr. Bean, and now this. And I think that and of course the Olympics, who can forget that? But Rowan Atkinson's quite smart because his physical, mostly nonverbal comedy plays extremely well globally because it transcends language and doesn't have to rely on dubs and things like that. Very, very smart. Finally, I too like the Birchwood fireplace the best of all the fireplaces available on Netflix. And I myself had it on this week. But I wonder if Netflix has made as much money off of this as, although it's hard to tell because, they don't have an a la carte menu. But that one dude on YouTube who uploaded a 10-hour fireplace video 9 years ago. See, the YouTube one is free with ads. Well, you've got to be a Netflix subscriber to watch this one, right? So that's why YouTube still has the most views overall of any streamer, because it's free with ads, right? I'm sure some of you are like, I pay for no ads. That's fine, but it's free with ads, right? And that's why network TV used to be as big as it was, because for most people, if you could just get a pair of bunny ears, you could watch it for free with free with ads. Then on digital, with Apple's charts, there's Wicked for Good at number 1, which just dropped. While the rest of the top 10, as you can see, is people catching up now that the holidays are over with recent theatrical releases, most of which only did okay in theaters as people clearly preferred to wait to watch them on digital at a much lower price point. Oh man, I think this Netflix Warner Brothers deal has a lot of problems, which we're going to be probably discussing because the deal's probably going to go through, I'm afraid. I hope not. I hope someone can kill it. But, all right. So anyway, I'm glad to see Nuremberg still doing extremely well, but Disney just can't catch a break outside of its $3 billion movies. Oh, poor Disney. But yes, Tron Ares is already out of the top 10. It's a really solid movie. Maybe people will discover it on Disney Plus for no extra cost. And in fact, it will be on Disney Plus this Wednesday. But I do think that Jared Leto is donezo. I think he really killed this movie and is keeping a lot of people from giving it a chance. How about you? Why won't you watch Tron Ares? I want to know, really. And you should watch it. His career is already dead. You might as well enjoy it. All right, as for this coming weekend in theaters, we have the return of Gerard Butler, single-handedly keeping his career alive. Don't you die on me! Like Sandra Bullock did in the late 90s and 2000s by producing his own small movies. And it's not for nothing. Sandra Bullock eventually came back in a major way. And hey, over the weekend or the past week, the internet was like, Gerard Butler would be the best Kratos or however you pronounce it. I don't play that game, but I know it's a big one. And he's probably like, excellent, tell my agent to call them. And somehow Walter Hamada has returned, this time for Paramount, where he returns to the horror genre, which initially made him a hot executive over at Warner Brothers, this time with Primate, which I suspect might be a very big hit for him. On digital on Tuesday, another Disney goes with the Disney machine churns on now with Predator Badlands hitting digital. Such a good movie. If you haven't seen that already, I'd check it out. While on streaming, Netflix has rom-com People We Meet on Vacation on Friday. The Critics' Choice Awards, by the way, are tonight for both movies and shows. The very first awards show of the season, the Golden Globes, is a week from today, and it should be interesting. As for shows, Beast Games returns on Wednesday, while on Thursday, The Pit Season 2 starts on HBO Max. The review embargo lifts tomorrow. My review will go up sometime tomorrow. Maybe not when the embargo lifts, but sometime tomorrow. It's very good. His and Hers drops on Netflix, and The Traitors is back on Peacock. Then on Friday, 1,000 Blows Season 2 drops on Hulu, and Tehran kicks off its Season 3 on Apple TV. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And are you excited about the upcoming award season that's about to kick off? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.